Hello friends, welcome to CEC Live Lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to continue further in our series on principles of ecology. In our previous session we discussed on ecosystem energetics. Dear friends, today also we are going to discuss more on the topic, that is ecosystem energetics. And for the discussion on the topic, we have with us in our studios Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat. Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat is Assistant Professor in Department of Zoology, Ramjas College, University of Delhi. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat on today's topic, then do call us through our toll-free number. Our number is 1-800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1-800-110-430. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Rawat, once again. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the lecture.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So today, I'll be continuing with the ecosystem energetics that we started. We have already talked about the types of energy, and we just reached how this energy is transferred or through an ecosystem. So we'll be elaborating on the topics, we'll be talking about the different dynamic aspects also. So the learning objectives for today's session would be to understand about the energy partitioning in the food chains and food webs, to understand about the effects of various resource quality and reward feedback, in which we'll talk about the role of heterotrophs. We'll understand about the ecological efficiencies. We'll understand the control of energy flow, that is, we'll talk about the trophic cascades, as well as we'll talk about the energy equality or the energy quality as we talk about it. The major reference which we have used in this particular session is by Odum EP for Fundamentals of Ecology, Indian edition by Brooks and Cole. So this will be the major reference, and it has been used only for the educational purpose. So reviewing quickly what we talked about, the universal energy flow model, one that is applicable to any living component, plant, animal, microorganisms, individual population or trophic group. So you can see there the universal energy flow model which has been drawn there. B refers to the standing crop biomass, which is expressed in the calories. I is the total energy input. So the energy enters through this I, and this I is basically the energy input or intake. And this is for strict autotrophs, it is the light, and for strict heterotrophs, it is the organic food. So this is the energy input which comes into here. Then there is energy which is non-assimilated. Then there is energy which is assimilated, and this assimilated energy is divided into the productivity as well as the energy which is used for the respiration. This productivity energy which we are talking about is used for three purposes. That one is the growth purpose, one the energy that is stored which becomes the input for the next level, and the energy which goes waste or excreted in terms of feces, etc. So that's how the energy is flowing. So we can see that Na is the not assimilated, that is, that pass simply through the biological structure. A is the assimilated energy, the portion used or assimilated. This ratio of A and I, will talk about and elaborate on this energy efficiency which we just touched last time, is basically the efficiency of assimilation, which is very low as in light fixation by plants or food feeders, but very high as when animals or bacteria consume high energy food such as the sugars or amino acids. Then there is the respiration, as I told, which is burned and lost as heat. P is termed as the production, where the net primary production in plants and secondary production in case of animals. Secondary production is basically, as consumer individuals, is composed of tissue, growth and litters of the individuals. G refers to the growth and reproduction. And as I told, that this productivity, the production, is basically divided into then three aspects. One, the energy which is used for the growth, reproduction, etc. The energy that is stored, which becomes the intake energy for the next trophic level. And E, which is basically the excreted energy which is thrown out of the biological structure. The ratio between P and R and between biomass and the respiration varies widely and is ecologically very significant. The R, which is termed as the maintenance energy, is large in populations functioning at higher trophic levels and in communities with a large biomass. The R increases when a system is stressed. So this is basically how in a universal model the energy distribution occur. So when we say that one energy is going on or flowing from one structure to another, then now we'll talk about that how much amount is transferred, what is the quality of this type of energy, and the proportion of energy that is flowing through different aspects also varies. P is relatively large in active population of small organisms such as bacteria or algae, or in youthful rapidly growing communities, and in systems benefiting from energy subsidy. So we had already talked about the concept of energy subsidy last time, so I will not elaborate it, but that is which contributes to the net productivity also. The universal model of energy flow can be used in two ways. One, that it can represent a species population in which the appropriate energy inputs and links with other species would be shown as a conventional species-oriented food web diagrams. So we will talk about this species population usage more today. In this, basically at every trophic level, it is contributed or constituted by different populations and the energy flow through them. The model can also represent a discrete energy level, in which case the biomass and energy channels represent all or part of many populations supported by the same energy source. So this is what they are talking about, the application of universal energy flow model for understanding the flow of energy in an ecosystem. So we can talk about, as we will do today, in terms of food chain and food webs, that different levels are occupied by different species population, and we study or understand how the energy is flowing from one to another. We can also use these levels as energy levels, and then each energy level may constitute of a number of species or populations which are present at a particular energy, and how then this energy is transferred onto the other level. So we can also use these energy levels terms and understand this universal energy model to understand the ecosystem energy flow also. So this is a diagram which I show, a picture where you can see and you can easily make out what it is all about. So corn is eaten by a rat and the rat is eaten by an owl, or carrots are eaten by a rabbit, is eaten by a fox, is eaten by a lion. I think in the 5th standard we got introduced to these chains, and these chains are called as the food chain, because one level is constituting the food for the other. Like in the last one, the grass is fed upon by grasshopper, and then grasshopper is eaten by frog, python, eagle, and these are simple examples of what we call are the food chains. Now the transfer of energy, now we'll talk about in terms of energy, these food chains, the transfer of energy from its source or autotrophs, that is the plants, through a series of organisms that consume and are consumed is termed as the food chain. So when we talk about in terms of energy, we do not talk in terms only of the type of organism or species which we have been doing till now. So today we talk about that energy flow from one organism to the other, and then if the energy is flowing in this manner, then it is termed as the food chain. And obviously, because the flow of energy comes from when one is consumed by the other, it is termed as the food, because one represents the food of the higher level. So that way a food chain is constituted, and the energy flows from the primary base, which is the autotrophs, to the higher consumer organisms. Food chains, however, are not isolated sequences. They are all interconnected. So in this particular picture I showed you, there were discrete food chains that were shown. But that's now how it occurs in the environment. In the environment, there is an interlocking pattern which is called as a food web. For example, this. So this is termed as a food web. Now it's an interconnecting link. The corn can be eaten by a grasshopper, and the grasshopper can be eaten by a rat, or corn can directly be eaten by a rat. So this type of interconnections or interlocking patterns of food chain is termed as a food web. So in a natural ecosystem, the isolated sequences of food chain generally does not exist, and there is a interlocking that is happening. Now food chains are of two basic types. One is called as the grazing food chain, in which that it starts from a green plant base goes to grazing herbivores, that is the organisms that eat living plants or tissues, and then on to the carnivores, that is the animal eaters. This is the conventional traditional food chain which we always talk about. It always starts with a plant base and goes on to a consumer, one organisms and then animal eaters and all those things. So this is a traditional food chain we have been talking about. There's another kind of food chain that exists which is called as the detritus food chain. Now this is a very important food chain which goes from the non-living organic matter to microorganisms and then to detritus feeding organisms or detritivores and their predators. So the primary base here is not the plant, but generally the dead leaves of the plants, the roots, the dead animals, dead organisms, which goes, so all the non-living organic matter which is then fed upon by the microorganisms, the saprophytes, the parasites which live on it, the saprophytes basically, which live on it, and then they become the food for the further detritus organisms which live on this dead decaying matter, and then their predators. So that constitutes another kind of food chain termed as the detritus food chain. Now, in complex natural communities, organisms whose nourishment is obtained from the sun through the same number of steps are said to belong to the same trophic level. So now we are making it, we are understanding it deeply. We started with the simple traditional food chain. We understood that there is an interlocking of the food chain patterns giving rise to the food webs. And now we come to the aspect which is the trophic level aspect. So trophic level is when starting from the plant base and the nourishment that is obtained from the sun follows the same number of steps, then it is termed at a particular trophic level. For example, in a conventional grazer food chain, the green plants constitutes the first level, the producer trophic level. The herbivores constitutes the second level, which is the primary consumer trophic level. The primary consumers constitute the third level, the secondary consumer trophic level, and the secondary consumers constitutes the fourth level, which is the tertiary consumer trophic level. So at each division we describe it as a trophic level which follows the same steps from the sun to that particular level. Now one thing is very important. So in this particular picture it shows a food web as well as it mentions the different trophic levels. So you can see that grass, seeds, trees, they all constitutes what are termed as the producers. So they belong to the same trophic level. So one thing to note is that trophic classification is one of the function and not one of the species as such. So a given species population may occupy one or more trophic levels according to the source of energy actually assimilated. So there are different species that can constitute the same trophic level because they are equally at an equal distance from the sun in terms of the steps. So you can see here that these producers are consumed by the primary consumers, which are the heterotrophs, and these heterotrophs then you can see constitute the same trophic level irrespective that they are belonging to the different species. The consumers, the primary consumers or the herbivores are then consumed by the secondary consumers, which are the carnivores. Then secondary consumers are further predated upon by the tertiary consumers which lie on the top of this particular food web. So this food web, the species are then divided into different trophic levels depending upon the distance from the original source of energy. So in this case, for example, the producers take up the energy from the sun, or they can also take up the energy from the from the decomposers, which provide the nutrients and other materials to all these different organisms. So this trophic level is very important to understand and has a lot of ecological significance. Now, this was the background about how does it run in the ecosystem, the interaction between different organisms of the ecosystem, where we talk about the food chain and the food web. Now, coming back to the energy energetic aspect of it, there is energy partitioning that occurs in the food chain and the food web. At each transfer in a food chain, a proportion of the potential energy as high as 80 to 90% is lost as heat. So there is very less amount of energy that is actually used here. So when we talked about the universal energy model, there is an input energy that is coming in, and that input energy, there is a lot of non-assimilated energy which was going out, which was just passing through the biological structure without being utilized. So you know that amount of proportion, 80 to 90, that proportion is 80 to 90% of the potential energy that comes in, and it is dissipated as heat without even utilization. And depending upon different types of ecosystems and depending upon different quality of the quality of each trophic level, this percentage varies. So at each transfer, a proportion is dissipated as heat, and only a small proportion, that is approximately less than 1% of the available solar energy, is fixed by the plant in the first place. So to start with, only 1%, less than 1% of the energy is stored as food by the plants, that is the solar energy that is coming from the sun. Each link in a traditional agricultural food chain, a grazing food chain that we talked about, decreases the available energy by about 1 order of magnitude, that is about 10-fold. So at the transfer from each energy, each trophic level, there is a reduction of transfer that occurs. So at each trophic level, much of the energy is dissipated as heat, and only a proportion of energy is passed on or available for the next trophic level to attain when it consumes it. Whereas, so we'll also talk about this aspect, that whereas the quantity of energy is declining with each transfer, the quality or concentration of the energy that is transferred increases. We'll elaborate on this particular point a little later. But we'll look at that how the first 3 points, that is how the energy is partitioned in a food chain. So this is describing, this is an important table which is describing that how this energy in terms of percentage is distributed at different trophic levels. So you can see at the producer level, this is talking about the assimilation energy. The proportion of assimilated energy which is present at the producers, 60 to 70% is used for production, and around 30 to 40% is used for respiration. At the primary consumer level, 40 to 50 a percentage of energy is used for production. However, the respiration is quite high, and 50 to 60% of the energy that is available. This is also called as the utilization energy. So utilization energy constitutes both the production energy as well as the respiration energy. And at the primary consumer level, the respiration energy, the component, is much more than the production energy. And you can see that further at the secondary consumer level, in terms of energy that is available with them for the production, there is only 5 to 10%. So we have already talked about the different aspects of production, which is basically for growth and reproduction. Some energy that is stored in terms of fat, etc., which becomes the energy that is available for the next trophic level, and some energy that is excreted in terms of feces, etc. So that production level at the secondary consumer level, only 5 to 10% of energy is available. However, 90 to 95% of energy is used for its maintenance and goes into the R or the respiration. We can also look at the utilization efficiency here. So utilization efficiency is what amount of energy is available at that particular trophic level. So at producer level, less than 1% of energy is actually available. So the source of energy for producers is the sun. So if 100% of solar energy is absorbed by the plants, then only less than 1% of the energy is actually made available at this particular trophic level for the next one. So now if this 1% which is available to primary consumers is 100%, is considered as the 100% at that particular level, then only 20 to 25% of energy is available to go to the next trophic level. And at secondary consumer level, there is 30 to 40% of the energy that is available for the going to the higher trophic level, which is there. So this is the utilization efficiency we talk about. Then we also show here the assimilation efficiency in terms of percentages. So in producers, whatever energy comes in, 60 to 70% of the energy is used for assimilation. So the non-assimilated energy will constitute 30 to 40%, and this 60 to 70% is actually, what is available is less energy. So 100% of the energy that is coming, 60 to 70% of energy is absorbed by the producers, which is converted to less than 1% of the food material that is available for the next trophic level. And among this 60 to 70% of the assimilated energy, 60 to 70% is used for the production, that is for creating the biomass, generating the biomass, and 30 to 40% is utilized for its own respiration. I hope this energy distribution or energy partitioning in a food chain is clearer. I'll explain again, taking the example of the primary consumers. So at the primary consumer level, if 100% of the energy was coming from the producers, then 70 to 80% is assimilated. So 70 to 80% is assimilated, and 20 to 30% is just dissipated as heat. And that 70 to 80% which is assimilated, among that 40 to 50% is used for the production, that is growth, reproduction, increase in the litter size, etc. And 50 to 60% is used for its own maintenance, that is in respiration. So from this 70 to 80%, only 40 to 50% is used for production. And production means if this primary consumer is consumed by a secondary consumer, then only 20 to 25% of this energy stored in terms of fats and other things, etc., is available for the secondary consumer. So this, the total energy, the 100% of the energy which is coming from the producers is used in the assimilation. This assimilation is divided into two components, for the production and for the respiration. In the production, which is available for the next trophic level, is the utilization energy, which is about 20 to 25%. So that is how the energy is partitioned through a food chain, and that is how we can see that as it is going on from one trophic level to another trophic level, the quantity is decreasing. It has taken 100% of the energy from the sun, but it has only fixed 1% of energy which is to be utilized by the next trophic level which is available. So this particular energy, the numbers that I have talked about can fit into this linear food chain or a single chain model, where these producers are taking the solar input, dissipating something as heat, which is the non-assimilated energy, and then utilizing it for the production, which is the net productivity, and also utilizing it for its own maintenance, which is basically the respiration. Then at this particular trophic level, this is the constitution, and from this trophic level it goes to the primary consumers. So a lesser amount of energy is available for this particular trophic level, out of which a lot of energy just goes non-utilized. Some of its energy is again used for the production, some of its energy is used for the respiration or the maintenance, and some of the energy is also excreted. So the energy then that is available to the next trophic level, which is the secondary consumers, is further decreased. So what we have talked about, you can see here that this is kilocalorie per square meter per day, and this is actually decreasing. So 4000 is the input energy, and what reaches the secondary consumers is basically the 0.1 kilocalorie per square meter per day. So the quantity of energy is decreasing, and how it is distributed in a single channel food chain, it is basically shown here. But we can't study about the grazing and the detritus food chain as the separate ones. They generally combine together and go hand in hand and give rise to what is called as the two-channel energy flow or the Y-shaped energy flow model. Now this model is more realistic, as it confirms the basic stratified structure of the ecosystems. As I said, the two food chains do not occur in isolation, and they are very much interconnected. then the direct consumption of living plants and the consumption of dead organic matter are usually separated in both time and space. So we cannot club both the producers as well as the decomposers into one trophic level and study just one single channel model, because both these organisms are separated in time as well as in space. Moreover, the macro consumers such as the phagotrophic animals and the micro consumers such as the saprophytic bacteria and fungi, they differ greatly in size metabolism relations and in the techniques required to study them. So it is better that rather than studying the single channel model, we study there are advantages of studying the two energy flow or the Y-shaped model. In this Y-shaped model, you can see that the autotrophs are the basically which are trapping the sunlight or the solar energy, but then it divides into the primary consumers. So this is the grazing food chain where it goes to the herbivores and its predators, and this is the detritus food chain where it goes to the decomposers and its predators, and obviously they are interconnected, and each level some of the energy is dissipated as the heat energy. So we'll continue with this more.
With this note, thank you, and thank you so much for giving us this session. The friends, you are requested to be with us as we are back after a short break. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome back to this session. Friends, you are welcome once again as we are going to talk more on ecosystem energetics, and for the discussion we have with us in our studios Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat. Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat is Assistant Professor in the Department of Zoology, Ramjas College, University of Delhi. Friends, if you have any question in mind, do call us through our toll-free number. Our number is 1800-110-4330. Now I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Charu Dogra Rawat once again. Hello ma'am, welcome to the lecture.
Talking about the energy partitioning, we have been doing that in a single channel food chain where the producers are consumed by the primary consumers, which are consumed by the secondary consumers, and which are then consumed by the tertiary consumers. So we have already seen how the energy is partitioned through each trophic level. But it's better to study the two different food chains, which is the grazing food chain and the detritus food chains, in connection with each other, and therefore it is appropriate to study the energy partitioning in a Y-channel or a Y-shaped or a two-channel energy flow model as shown. So this two energy flow chain model is basically when we study both the food chains in connection with each other, and the energy that is coming from the plants is actually distributed and goes into these two food chains that are also interconnected in ecosystem. An important aspect in this case is that the proportion of net production energy that flows down the two pathways varies in different kinds of ecosystems. So that the the energy which is available at the producer level is not equally distributed into these two different food chains. But the distribution of the energy varies in different kinds of ecosystem and often varies seasonally or annually in the same ecosystem. For example, the shallow waters, heavily grazed pastures or grasslands, 50% or more of the net production goes to the grazing pathway, whereas in marshes, oceans, forests and most of the natural ecosystems, which are basically termed as the detrital systems, more than 90% or more of autotrophic production are processed into particulate and dissolved organic matter in water, sediments and soils. So most of the plants, trees, whatever biomass they have collected, there is in certain natural ecosystems, more than 90% of this energy is processed into two types of materials, the particulate or the dissolved organic matter, and it passes on through the detrital system rather than the grazing system. So the proportion of net production or the distribution into these two varies in different ecosystems as well as in seasonally or temporally in the same ecosystem, as I said. Then there comes the branched food chain model also. The energy flow originating from non-living organic matter involves several distinct food chain pathways. So it's not just single channel models or a Y-shaped channel model, but there are then the different branched chain models to study the energy partitioning. So in this branched chain model, for example, where the plants are the consumers and then it goes into the food chain with primary, secondary and tertiary consumers, you can see that we have seen the grazing one and the detrital one. Then the detrital one or the non-living organic matter is then divided into two major pathways. One of the major pathway is the through the particulate organic matter, that is the dead tissue that lies, and then the primary consumers feed upon these dead tissues. So that is the most dominant pathway, which is the particulate organic matter. Then some of the organic matter is also available in terms of the dissolved organic matter. There are two different types of such organic matter which is made available. For example, in mycorrhizae, fungi, etc., there is vascular, they directly feed upon the vascular part of the tissues, so the dissolved organic matter. And in some of the organisms, such as the different saprophytes, they produce or they secrete exudate photosynthate, which is also the form available in the terms of the dissolved organic matter. So you can see here that the major pathway is particulate organic matter, but in dissolved organic matter there can be the vascular, where there is a mutualistic or a parasitic association of the primary consumers with the tissues, and they do the active extraction, or there are the exudates which are released and then taken up by the different organisms. Two more subdivisions occur in this grazing as well as in the living tissue or the dead tissue. One is termed as the granivorous, which is where the organisms feed upon the seeds rather than leaves and tissues, which is a high source of very good source of all the nutrients, etc. And then there is also what is called as the nectarivorous, where the organisms feed upon the nectar of the plants, which are the exudates only, but they are feeding upon the nectars of the plants and they play an important role in pollination, etc. And therefore govern the dynamics of the ecosystem. So as we can see that we can then further subdivide these grazing and detrital food chains into give rise to such a kind of a branched food chain model, and therefore we study energy partitioning in such systems, and that is how it flows through different levels or different parts of the food chains and food webs. Now so this was basically how the energy is flowing through the ecosystem and how the energy is partitioned in terms of the food chains and food webs then we are talking about. When we talk about energy quantity, then the quality is also very important. So we'll come to talk about this energy quality, but one aspect which I talk about here is the resource quality. So resource quality is basically when we talk about this food chain. For example, as I said, that seeds are much higher in nutrients than the leaves and the roots. So the resource quality also governs how much energy is available for passing on to the next trophic level. Quality of the food resource is as important as the quantity of the energy flow. The plant products differ greatly in resource quality depending on the amount of readily available carbohydrates, lipids and proteins, and the amount of recalcitrant materials that inhibit edibility. Such kind of materials, for example, cellulose, etc., lignocellulose, etc., that inhibit editability. These materials, as well as the different nutritive materials which are present with the source, is also responsible for how much amount of energy is available for the next trophic level, or how much amount of energy is transferred from one level to the another. The presence and absence of stimulants and repressors, and the physical structure of plant parts, for example, the texture, the size, the biomass, etc. of the plant parts, is also determine the rate and timing of the energy transfer. So it also the energy transfer is also dependent upon such factors. As I said, the seeds, the nectars, the exudate, photosynthetate, they are much more nutritive than the stems or roots or leaves of the plants. Therefore, the resource quality is very important to be considered for understanding that how the energy flows or how much amount of energy is passing or available at a particular trophic level. So it's an important factor for consideration. Then there is a term which is called as the reward feedback, and it refers to the role of the heterotrophs. This reward feedback, what it mentions is that when a downstream organism in the energy flow has a positive effect on its upstream food supply, then this is termed as the reward feedback, which basically means that a consumer organisms is doing something that is sustaining the survival of its food resource. Usually what we see is that a food source is sustaining the next level or the primary consumer, or the primary consumer is sustaining the secondary consumer. So generally it is in terms of that. But there is also one should also understand that there is something that a primary consumer is doing for the maintenance of the producer. But this is termed as the reward feedback. For example, the annual vegetative growth of the East African plants is greater with the grazing by the vast herds of antelopes than without them. So there has been studies that if the grasses are eaten or grazed by the antelopes, then the vegetative growth is greater than when they are not. So somehow these antelopes are, or the secondary or the primary consumers, they are increasing the producer level. So that is also, it has been studied. Or a similar effect of bison grazing on the North American grasslands has also been studied. Then it has also been observed that it is not in terms of the number or the quantity or the biomass that is generated, but the biodiversity is also increasing. So somehow the next trophic level is increasing the biodiversity at its lower trophic level, a reward feedback. An example from the aquatic ecosystem, the fiddler crabs of the genus Uca, they feed on the surface algae and detritus in coastal marshes. They seem to cultivate their food plants. And how do they do that? For example, by burrowing, they increase the water circulation around the roots. That brings oxygen and nutrients. A reworking of the organically rich mud provide enhanced conditions for the growth of the benthic algae. Or the adjusted sediment particles and fecal pellets enhance the growth of the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So somehow these fiddler crabs which are feeding on the algae are contributing to the increase in the growth conditions of these algae. So sometimes they say that they release certain kind of growth hormones, or some organisms release certain kind of stimulants that increases the productivity of the lower trophic level. So this is the role of the heterotrophs. So heterotrophs is one thing is that obviously the significance of the heterotrophs is to maintain, when we will talk about the control of this energy flow, to maintain and keep a check on the lower trophic levels. But it is also somehow increasing the productivity of the lower trophic level, which is the reward feedback. Coming to the terms which is the ecological efficiency. So we touched upon this when we were talking about the universal energy flow model. Then when we talk about the input energy or the assimilation energy or the the production, the respiration, then rather than the discrete values, what is more important is the ratio between these energies. So the ratios that are expressed as percentages between the energy flow at different points along the food chain are termed as the ecological efficiencies. So this table is again very important, which tells us about the different ratios and a simple explanation of these particular ratios. For example, the ratio between the trophic levels, there is something, the ratio between the I1 and the I minus 1, which is basically the trophic level energy intake, or as described by the scientist Linderman's efficiency. For the producer trophic level, this is termed as the PG, which is the total photosynthesis or gross primary production, divided by the L, which is the total light that is coming. So I1 minus II is basically the energy intake, and the T minus 1, so at time T and at time T minus 1 is the preceding trophic level. So the energy, the input energy which is coming to a particular trophic level divided by the energy that was available at the previous trophic level gives us the trophic level energy intake. So at producer level, the total amount of energy that is intake is the total light that is coming, and this total light is when divided by the gross primary production, then the gross primary production divided by the total light intake will give us the trophic level energy intake which is there. Similarly, the trophic level assimilation efficiency. So assimilation energy that is present at the one trophic level divided by the assimilation energy which was present at the previous trophic level. The trophic level production efficiency, the production energy which is present at a particular trophic level divided by the production energy which was present at the previous trophic level. So that ratio tells us about the trophic level production efficiency. So all these relation or ratios are between the trophic levels. Within the trophic level, what exists is, for example, the PT divided by AT. We have talked about this. This is basically the production efficiency. So an amount of energy that is utilized by production divided by the total amount of energy that was available for assimilation. So as I told you, assimilation is divided into two components, the production as well as respiration. So the amount of energy that is utilized for the proportion of energy that is utilized for the production is basically the production efficiency. Ecological growth efficiency is given by the production energy at a trophic level and the intake energy that is coming at that trophic level. So this intake energy will have two components. One is the assimilated energy and one is the non-assimilated energy which just passed through the trophic level without being absorbed. So this particular I1 is basically the total intake at that particular trophic level. The proportion of energy that is made for the production, available for the production, is termed as the ecological growth efficiency. Assimilation efficiency, that out of this total intake, whatever amount of energy is assimilated is termed as the assimilation efficiency. Whatever amount of energy is assimilated, whatever amount proportion of it that is used for the production is termed as the production efficiency. So we always talk in terms of ratios or ecological efficiencies rather than talking about the discrete values of energy at different levels, whether it is within the trophic level or whether it is between the trophic levels. It is always significant to talk about the ratio of energy that is available or that is utilized, as we talked about the utilization efficiency. So utilization efficiency is whatever energy that is available for at a particular trophic level, whatever energy is available for utilization at that particular trophic level. So utilization efficiency is basically whatever energy is available for the next trophic level to come in. So that was the utilization efficiency. So, we always talk in terms of efficiencies or the ratios rather than the discrete values. Efficiency ratios are meaningful in comparisons only. This is again very important, that one has to observe or make sure that the numerator and denominator of each ratio are expressed in the same units of measurement. When a poorly farmer talks about that, for example, there is a 40% of production of 40% production efficiency of chicken from the grains that it is feeding it. So this is not a very good comparison, or this is not the good use of production efficiency which we are talking about, because we are comparing the production of chicken, which is basically the wet biomass, from the grains, which is basically a dry weight biomass which we are using. So both, so for example, that is produces a 2 kilocalorie per gram, the grain, whereas the chicken produces 4 kilocalorie per gram of weight. So this is not a very good amount if the farmer says that 40% of production efficiency is there, then it is not a good term to talk about like that. Actual efficiency, if we see in terms of kilocalories, it's just 20% efficient, because 2 grams was present in the grain and now 4 grams is present. So there is a 20% production efficiency which is there, and not 40% as he is stating. So it is very important that both the numerators and denominators are in the same units of measurement, and generally it is expressed in the energy currency, such as the calories to calories. So if you do it by like 2 kilocalorie producing a 4 kilocalorie then per gram of weight, then it is a 20% efficiency what they are talking about. So that kind of normality needs to be there for using the ecological efficiency for comparing the different trophic levels of different ecosystem. Some of the facts which I'll state here is which will make you understand more about this efficiency is that production efficiency is lower in warm blood species. What does that mean? That in homeotherms than in the cold blooded animals or poikilotherms, much of the energy is utilized. So there is a total energy which is coming to the warm blooded animal. That energy is the assimilated energy, intake energy, and then the non-assimilated energy, whatever is available for the production and respiration, is the assimilation energy. Now the warm-blooded animals, they have to maintain their body temperature. So they allocate more energy, they utilize more amount of this assimilated energy for maintenance of the temperature. So they allocate or distribute more energy towards respiration than production. So the production efficiency is lower in warm-blooded animals, whereas in cold-blooded animals they do not require that extra amount of energy for maintaining the temperature of the body. So the production efficiency is higher in cold-blooded animals than the warm-blooded animals. The efficiency between trophic levels, accordingly, it is higher in invertebrates than in a mammalian food chain. Herbivorous, they tend to have higher production efficiency but lower assimilation efficiency, because they tend to, when they graze, the available energy with them, they tend to produce more biomass or they tend to produce more litters, they tend to have more growth rather than using them for the maintenance energy. So the herbivores generally have a higher production efficiency than the assimilation efficiency which they have. So that is how we compare within a trophic level, within different species. So this efficiency tends to it's a very useful measure to compare the different trophic levels, compare different species, or compare different ecosystems. The important aspect is that the unit of measurement should be the same. Coming to this control of energy flow. So we have seen that the energy is flowing. We have seen that the quantity of energy is decreasing. We have seen now how this energy is flowing through the different trophic levels. Now what we talk about is the food chain or food web dynamics, that how this energy flow is regulated or controlled. There are two different hypotheses. One is called as the bottom-up hypothesis, that holds the production is regulated by the upstream factors such as the nutrient availability. So more the nutrient that is available, higher will be the production. That is termed as the bottom up hypothesis, and it has been already seen that the primary production is more if in agricultural fields nitrogen fertilizer is used. So nutrient uptake is increased, the production increases. This is a bottom up hypothesis. So although it is to be noted that primary production is also considering the diversity. When there is a low nutrient production, the diversity is larger. However, when there is a higher nutrient availability, then dominance of a particular species occurs and the diversity is low. So the diversity index is lesser in number. So that also have to be considered. Then there is something which is called as the top-down hypothesis. It predicts that the predators or grazers regulate the productivity. That is the higher organisms. So they are regulating how much productivity is coming from the lower trophic levels. So as we saw that there is a feedback reward, so they were increasing the productivity. So the higher trophic level was governing the increase in the productivity or the higher. So in here the top-down hypothesis, they talk about the increase, the overgrazing aspect or the undergrazing aspect if we are considering a grazing food chain. So what effects does this undergrazing, overgrazing have on the productivity of the producers which is there? So although in most of the model systems evidences are there that both the top down as well as the bottom up control occur, and these are termed as the trophic cascades in terms of ecosystem study. So bottom up and trophic down are shown in this particular figure, where you can see that this is a typical food chain pyramid. When we talk about that the producer has the most amount of mass, this is a typical trophic pyramid. So as it is increasing, so from the next level to next level, the food chain pyramid, the energy is decreasing. This is a bottom up control. When there is if the production is more, at each level the energy is more. So this is a bottom. So you use more nutrient, there will be more productivity. Because there will be higher productivity at producer level, there will be more productivity at the primary consumer level, and so on. So this is a bottom up control. Top down control, there is a higher production at the consumer level, but the primary consumer level is decreasing. It is decreasing because there is the role played by the secondary consumer is dominant. So the secondary consumer is controlling the productivity at the primary consumer level, which is then controlling because of the decrease in the productivity here, the productivity here is increasing. So the increased consumer population. So this is a top-down control. So this is the bottom-up control, this is a top-down control. And this is basically what we termed as the trophic level cascade. As you can see, there is an increased tertiary consumer production. So if the consumer production at this level increases, at this particular level it will decrease. At this particular level it will increase. Because this has increased, at this particular level it will decrease. So this is again a top-down control in a cascade manner that is occurring. So bottom up, top down. That is how the energy flow in a particular trophic level. This we have taken the example of a simple food chain. It will be much more complicated in terms when the food chains are interconnected or when we talk about in food webs. But this energy production is controlled in both the bottom up and the top down level, and therefore at a particular trophic level how much energy is present or available or is used for production varies according to these kind of regulations or controls that I am occurring, constituting the ecosystem dynamics. So this talks about the control. The last aspect in this particular case is talking about the energy quality. So energy quality is an important. We have talked about the energy quantity, and we know that passing on, when energy passes or transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level, the quantity decreases. But the energy quality or the concentration keeps on increasing. This energy quality or concentration can be expressed in terms of the amount of one type of energy required to develop the same amount of another type, which basically means is that when we talk in terms of quantity, there is very many measurable amounts. We can talk in terms of kilocalories, joules, watts. There are units of measurement in which we can quantify the energy that is available, and we very clearly see that this energy is decreasing. But this energy is decreasing in terms of quantity. As we go higher up in the food chain level, the quality of the concentration of the energy increases. But there was no measure to measure this particular energy concentration, and E.P. Odom gave this term, which is termed as the embodied energy or later termed as the emergy, and this emergy is defined as all the available energy already used directly or indirectly to create a service or product. I'll just explain this by taking an example that, for example, if 1000 calories of sunlight are required to produce 1 calorie of food by plants, so total intake or the input energy or the solar energy that is available is 1000 calories. However, only 1 calorie is fixed by the plants in terms of foods. This 1 calorie of energy is available for the next trophic level. So the transformity is 1000 solar energy calories to 1 food calorie. So it should be 1000. So 1000 solar energy calories to 1 food calorie. So emergy of the food is 1000 solar energy calories, which we talk about. So the fixed amount of energy that is fixed in food is 1 calorie, but the emergy is termed as the 1000 solar energy. So whatever is available or used to produce that product is termed as the emergy. Now, what is the significance of talking about this energy quality? There is a major significance in talking about this energy quality is that you have to understand this particular. So this is a representation where we talk about in terms of energy. So this is, as you can see, the solar energy this is a pictorial diagram of a food chain, and very easily you can see that the quantity of energy is decreasing. So for example, if so many units of energy was intake and present from the sun, then at particular level, at this particular level, and finally at this particular level, only 40 unit of energy was available. However, to start with, there were like 5 lakh units which was available. 50 lakh units that were available. Only 40 units are available at this particular consumer level. So this is the quantity of energy that is decreasing. Let's look at this in the term of a food chain model that we have talking about, or the energy chain model. In the energy chain model, again the quantity of energy is decreasing, but the concentration of energy, the solar calories, is increasing, or the energy is more concentrating. Similarly, if we see that the electric energy chain, that how the electricity is produced, this particular solar energy goes to the plants, goes to the dead material, fossilized, goes to the power plant, and the electricity is produced. So there is a concentration of energy that is occurring. There is a concentration of energy that is occurring in a spatial hierarchical model which is shown here. So this energy quality is very important. You can run an automobile with a fossil fuel, petrol, but you can't run an automobile with the solar energy. You have to use the amount of solar energy which is equivalent to the fossil fuel energy or petrol energy. So the solar energy is more dissipated, more dispersed. You have to concentrate in the petrol. Solar energy is taken up by the plants, fossilized, used in the power plant, and for the formation of petrol, the solar energy is used and concentrated in these fossil fuels. Therefore, this is very significant energy quality, because one have to understand where to use the solar energy and where to use the fossil fuel energy. The fossil fuel energy is a very highly concentrated form of energy. You can't use the fossil fuel energy to just warm up a room, where the solar energy can be used for such lowly jobs. So the highly concentrated form of energy is to be utilized for where the higher amount of energy is used. So the solar energy can be utilized to run an automobile only if it is equivalent in the concentration form to a petrol. But that will require another maintenance energy or the production energy, which will again be very expensive. So all these measures have to be kept in mind to talk about the energy quality in terms of the presence or availability at different trophic levels. So that explains the ecosystem energetics, where the energy is coming and trapped mostly by the sunlight, and how it is distributed into the ecosystem, what are the dynamics related to it, and what are the different properties or factors that we need to study.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving us this session on ecosystem energetics. Dear friends, we are taking your leave with the promise that we are going to meet again soon and would be discussing more under the series. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.